Now it's time for some New York Mets baseball talk. Here's Gary Mack bringing you the latest news and analysis from Mets Nation and the world of baseball on another edition of Mets Musings.
Hello and welcome to a special holiday edition of Mets Musings. I'm Gary Mack, your host, and what I'm doing for you, little special extra Christmas gift, and that's an interview I did about 2 years ago with the 1972 Rookie of the Year, member of the Mets Hall of Fame, three-time All-Star, Mr. Jon Matlack. It was a great interview. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I hope you'll enjoy it too. So until next time, remember, have a great holiday season. I'll see you in 2023. Keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets. And now to Jon Matlack. I'm really excited about this week's guest, everybody. He is was a three-time All-Star, in National League All-Star. He was also the 1972 National League Rookie of the Year. And also, if we have a baseball season, I don't know what's going to happen, but he is one of the 2020 inductees into the New York Mets Hall of Fame. He is Jon Matlack. Jon, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Gary.
Congratulations on being, elected, or however they word it, into the Mets Hall of Fame. It's a terrific honor and long overdue.
Well, it is a terrific honor, and it was somewhat surprising, and it was an election, as I understand it. I'm not sure who all votes, but I got a call actually day after my birthday in January from Jeff Wilpon and letting me know the news, and it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's got to be just terrific to go into a team's the team's Hall of Fame, because that means, to me, it mean a lot to the fans and to the team itself, and you accomplished something great there.
Well, I'm not sure about the greatness of my accomplishments, but I certainly had a great time playing there. It was a good place to play. It was well respected and well treated by the fans, and certainly something that I'm going to be very proud of going forward.
Now, so you're drafted as a 17-year-old high school player, and if I remember correctly, I read somewhere that you were shocked that there were even scouts following you.
Well, in my junior year is when scouts started showing up, and I was so oblivious in a small little Pennsylvania town that I grew up in that I didn't know what was going on. I saw these guys with clipboards and stopwatches behind the backstop when we would be playing, and I finally asked our coach one day, I said, who are these guys with this stuff they're carrying around? And he said, oh, they're scouts. And I said, what's a scout? I didn't know what a scout was. And so he proceeded to tell me that they were representing major league clubs and they were looking for talent and all that kind of stuff. And
right.
My next question was, well, who are they looking at?
Yeah.
And he said, well, they're looking at you, and they're looking at the catcher, and they're looking at the second baseman and the center field. We had 4 or 5 pretty quality guys on our club,
mm-hmm.
and so the scouts were drawn by numerous people, as I understand it. But that's sort of my introduction to pro baseball, or how you would get to pro baseball. It was always something I dreamt about growing up, but had no idea how you got from here to there.
And what team were you a fan of growing up as a kid?
I grew up outside of Philly, about 40 miles, so
mm-hmm.
I was sort of in tune with what the Phillies were doing. Didn't really watch a whole lot of baseball because I was always busy playing it.
Right.
But I did try and watch if Sandy Koufax was ever pitching on television, because he was my guy, and I was able to see a few of his games on TV, and always aspired to sort of follow in his footsteps.
And I imagine that's why you wore number 32 in honor of Sandy Koufax.
You're pretty quick on the uptake. You sure are. That's exactly right.
Well, I go back as far as Koufax does too, so I remember certain things like that. So you get drafted by the Mets, and you go into the farm system. Your first year wasn't the best; it was a struggle.
Well, my first year was just a blink because due to the regulations or agreement, I guess, they had between Major League Baseball and American Legion Baseball, I got drafted in June. I think it was June 7th. And there was an agreement that until your American Legion season was complete, Major League Baseball would not try and sign a drafted player. Well, we couldn't lose. We played until somewhere in early August before I was ever able to negotiate and sign, and then was subsequently sent to Williamsport, which was Double A in the Eastern League, way over my head, but I think they only did it because it was close to home.
Mm-hmm.
So I had very rough sledding for a couple of starts trying to figure out how to get Double A hitters out. It was not easy.
Well, and that's quite a shock going from American Legion ball into Double A right away. Now they would never hear of doing anything like that.
Well, probably not, and I don't know. It might still happen just for expediency's sake. I was only there. I don't know. Probably wasn't more than 2.5, 3 weeks, and then sent immediately to instructional league for the remainder of the fall.
Mm-hmm. And so you come up in 71. You struggled then, but really 72 was when you came up for the full season. Well, 15-10 with a 2.32 ERA and win the National League Rookie of the Year. That must have been quite a thrill.
It was, no doubt. And again, this was something that I didn't even know was in existence. So somewhere in the August time frame, I would have a writer or two ask me about the Rookie of the Year award, and not to sound dumb, I just sort of tried to play it off like I didn't really know much about it, but whatever was going to be was going to be. And I had to do some quick research because I didn't know what it was all about. But I was fortunate enough to win that, and it was very nice honor, obviously, and certainly I'm proud of that.
We come into 73, and of course that was the year that it seemed nobody wanted to win the NL East. Well, take us through that year a little bit. And did you guys think you could win it that year? And how did you hold it all together?
Well, I don't know that we held anything together until the tail end. It was a very strange year, to say the least, and I think, I may be wrong, but I think every team in the division was in first place at some time or another during the season.
Wow.
And we managed to take it to our turn when it counted most, right at the end. How it all happened, I can't begin to tell you. I just know that somewhere mid to late August, we started to play more like a ball club, and everybody contributed whatever was needed. Whoever happened to be in that role at the time seemed to step up and get it done. And we came from a long ways back to end up winning it by just a little bit, and I guess that's all that matters.
That's all that counts, yeah. And really, I mean, that was a pretty good ball club. I mean, I don't think people give it credit when you look through that ball club, how good it really was.
And looking back, I got to agree with you. There was a lot of quality players there. I think there were some health factors, injury factors that played into the overall season. Had everybody been healthy all season long and through the playoffs and series, things may have been a little bit different, but that didn't happen, and things ended the way they did.
Yeah. You get to the playoffs, and what kind of a thrill was that as a second-year guy, and you're in the playoffs, and then you beat the mighty Cincinnati Reds. You go into the World Series, and you're playing the Oakland A's. Take us through that a little bit, how the feeling was. And you started Game 1, by the way.
Yeah, it was a little bit daunting, to say the least, to be headed into that kind of territory, especially as a 23-year-old and a second-year player. But I just went about it like I did most of my other games, is one step at a time, one pitch at a time, one out at a time. Tried to do the best I could every time I walked out there, and hopefully that was going to be good enough. And in some instances it was, and the last one it wasn't.
Well, yeah, Game 7 was a tough call. Now, did you pitch that on short rest, or you pitched on 3 days rest, I think? Was that short in those days, or?
It was. We had done it occasionally. If, I don't know, a doubleheader, you run into something weird during the season, there might have been one or two other times when we came back on early rest. But when it came to the series, it was 3 days throughout. For I pitched 1, 4, and 7, and the way the schedule was, that fell on the fourth day, not the fifth day. And you can make of that what you will. I don't know that it entered into it all that much. I didn't feel fatigued. When it comes right down to it, I had Campaneris hit a good pitch that ended up being a home run. The wind helped it a little bit, but he still had to hit it.
Right.
And then I hung a curveball to Reggie that you or most other people would probably hit out. So,
well, I don't know.
He did what he was supposed to do with that one, and that was just a mistake on my part.
Well, Reggie's hit a few in his lifetime.
Just a couple.
Just a couple. Now, we talked about some of the guys on that team that you played with. Any of them stand out to you as that were inspirational to you, or that were that you became especially close with? I mean, when you think about it, you had Tom Seaver and Jerry Kuzman on that staff, and you, Felix Millan, terrific second baseman. And, of course, you had a iconic hero on there, though granted he was at the end of his career. Willie Mays. Can you speak about any of those guys at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Willie was an icon, and even though the physical talent may have diminished somewhat at that point in his career, his instincts and mental approach to the game were top-notch, and was certainly somebody that you could just watch and learn from by the way he went about his business. And I mean, he had a knack for watching the trajectory of a pitch as it went to the plate, and if it looked like it was going to short hop the catcher, he was already a step and a half to second base.
Wow.
Even though he wasn't fast, he had the instincts to know when the catcher was going to have a difficult time handling a ball, and made it more times than not just based on that. Just a great guy to have around, and certainly watched out for me as a younger guy in terms of, if I was pitching the next day, he was one of the first ones as we were leaving the clubhouse to mentor me on being sure to get enough rest and all that good stuff.
Right. No prima donna in him at all, being that he was such a huge star.
Not that I saw.
No.
I mean, he as a player and with teammates, he was just one of the guys. Great to have around.
Yeah. Ed Kranepool's another guy that you played with, who's been around as long as dirt, I think, as far as the Mets are concerned.
Yeah. No, Crane was actually a roomie for a couple of years, and we got to be very close. Unfortunately haven't talked to him in a little while now, but it was certainly good to have around, and knew his way around the city, and helped me a bunch with acclimating to being in the metropolitan area, which was good. Tom Seaver, Jerry Kuzman, they put my locker right in between the two of them, so I couldn't have been in a better spot there in terms of getting any information that might have been needed from game to game as far as psychology, eating and physical training habits came from Seaver and that type of stuff. And Kuzman and I talked at length about how to pitch to various guys in different teams, and because we had similar stuff, and we would share tidbits back and forth, and he was a tremendous help as well.
Was that intimidating at all, being in a locker room between those two guys?
Well, it started out being a little bit that way, but it didn't last that long. I mean, I pitched well enough early enough that I don't know if they counted me as an equal, but they looked at me as somebody who could certainly help the ball club, and therefore they were going to help me, and that was a benefit.
Mm-hmm. And of course now it's a shame the battle that Tom Seaver's having with his health issues, the Alzheimer's and all of that sort of thing, and just a shame that it came to that.
No question. I couldn't say it better.
And by the way, Ed Kranepool is doing quite well. He had his operation, and he is doing pretty terrific. He's all over the place again. He was down in Florida, I heard, and so that's good to see.
Well, it's nice. You can't keep Crane down.
He's a very nice guy. I've been trying to get him on the show. I've talked to him a number of times, but I've never gotten him on the show. So, but I keep working on it. One of these days, I'll get him.
One of these days, you'll get it done, I'm sure.
And of course, then the Mets struggled the next few years that you were there, and you were there in '77 for the Midnight Massacre. You're still with the team, and what was that time? That specific time, that June when this was all going down. Did the players have any idea that Tom was going to get traded, or did it come as a complete shock to everybody? You knew he wasn't happy. He wanted an extension, and of course there was the whole thing with M. Donald Grant and Dick Young. Can you take us through that a little bit from your point of view?
Well, you knew a little bit about what was going on. Tom wasn't too open about it at the time. I think more of it came out in the press after the fact. But we were aware of some of the tension between he and Donald Grant, and especially between he and Dick Young. But I, at least, was not aware of the closeness between M. Donald Grant and Dick Young. So how much influence Dick Young may have had in all of this, I'm not really sure, but probably more than I thought at the time. And, you wondered what was going to come out of it, but I was certainly shocked when the trade took place. Even more shocked as they continued to clean house and got rid of all three of us in the span of a year.
Right. Yeah, and Kingman was gone, and in this span of the year, and you, as you said, you went to Texas in a trade in '78. What was
December? It was December '77
that
I left,
okay.
and Cousy was in June, I think, or sometime during '78. So virtually within a year's period of time, all three of us were somewhere else.
Yeah. And what was it like going to Texas after being in New York and drafted by them and everything, getting traded? What was you were traded in the offseason, so did that make it a little easier on you?
I think maybe, but it was still a complete and total shock, culture shock, change, realization that this is a business more so than a sport. And I guess he always thought about it that way, but until you were summarily shipped off to some other ball club for some other goods, you didn't really have the true meaning of what that business was like. And I don't know, I guess it was the kiss of death. I was told superstitiously that getting a house and fixing it up was not the thing you should do. And literally it was a 3-year program that we had been on, fixing up this older house that we bought. And the day we finished the last project, I was in the basement cleaning paintbrushes where we had finished painting the screened-in porch when I got the call that I had been traded. So the superstition came true.
And you stayed with Texas until '83. Did you enjoy your time there? Was it? I mean, it wasn't a winning team, I don't believe, at that time. And what did you find different in the American League from the National League?
Well, the leagues were definitely different. You had the designated hitter, and at that time, a completely different strike zone because the umpires were wearing the outside chest protectors down there, and the strike zone was higher. I had to make quite a few adjustments as far as that was concerned, and you also had the not the easy spot in the lineup. Not that every hitter was easy in the National. I'm sorry, every pitcher was easy in the National League, but in the American League, you weren't facing any of them, so there was always another bat in there that you had to contend with.
Mm-hmm.
So that was different. Being in Texas as opposed to New York, for at least half of our games, the heat became a factor, and trying to figure out how to deal with the Texas heat over the course of the season. Interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
So there were some differences for sure.
And the heat is usually the big thing down there, right? A lot of people have to get used to it. Now they built a new stadium. It was supposed to open this year, and that's got a roof on it. But that's the big thing that they talk about a lot when people go to Texas.
Well, it became an issue, I think, probably more so for the everyday players than for starting pitchers, but I think it was an issue for me as well. I ended up, I played all my years in New York at about 195 pounds, maybe bumped it to 200 at times, and that's where I felt comfortable in that climate and environment. And in Texas, I ended up putting on probably 8 or 10 more pounds to literally have something else as a background to sweat out and still have some stamina left. So I don't know if it happened all the time, but I remember one game I ended up pitching down there. It was over 100 when we started the game. It was a day game, and I ended up pitching all 9 innings. The game still was not complete. We ended up going extra innings, but I lost 11 pounds from start to finish in that ball game.
Wow, that's something. And that, nowadays you don't see that even the complete games. The game has changed so much nowadays.
Oh, no question. The roles are totally different. The starting pitchers were expected to go minimum of 7 back in my day, and everybody was mad if they came to get you before the game was over.
Right.
So it was your job to go out there and stay out there. Today, the starters seem to have a role of 2 times through the lineup or somewhere around 5, maybe 6 innings. The better ones will roll a little farther than that, but then they go to the specialty guys in the bullpen and try and lock it down if they've got a lead. And that's just the way the game has evolved.
Right. You retired in 83, and 4 years later you came back to the game in 87, I guess it was, with the San Diego Padres as a coach. Was that something that you wanted to get involved with in coaching, or did it just happen to fall into your lap?
Well, it was not something that I initially looked at, but the more I was away from the game and would watch it on television with my son, who was growing up at that point, noticed that there were things I'm seeing in big league games that I didn't think should have been part of those games and should have been taught guys before they got to the big leagues. And I finally decided that, I've got something to offer to these guys that are coming up in the system, and talked to my wife and said, look, we're not going to get rich doing this, but I want to go back and coach. And she was on board with that. And it was actually 88 that I started back with the Padres and coached from there right straight through 2012 in varying roles with different organizations.
Is that something that you'd like to get back into again, or are you happy with what you're doing now?
What I'm doing now is talking to guys on the phone once in a while about what I used to do, and that suits me just fine. Not that I wouldn't mind a coaching role somewhere, but I don't think in today's environment I would be afforded the opportunity to do a job as much as I would be told how to do it, and I don't think I can work under that basis.
It seems that's the way that it's going nowadays. I had a little acquaintance with the former Brooklyn Cyclones coach and pitching coach, and he used to say they get word from the front office that this guy's going 3 innings, and it kind of disappoint. I kind of understand it, but I also, kind of disappoints the fan from a fan point of view because you'd want to see a high draft pick pitch a little bit more.
Well, you would hope that guys that are capable of developing into somebody who could potentially allow the other members on the pitching staff a rest once in a while, that you would allow those guys to develop that way.
Yeah.
Everybody is sort of developed in a pigeonhole kind of category where that 100-pitch mark is some kind of golden rule that you don't go beyond, or if you do, it's only a couple of pitches beyond. And most everybody's sticking to that. And there's now a new one that shows that if a starting pitcher has seen the lineup twice, he can't figure out how to get him out the third time, so we can't let him go out there no matter what's going on. He might not have enough pitches to have his day complete, but he's going to go through them the third time, and heaven knows bad things are going to happen if that happens.
Right.
So that comes in large part from not allowing them to develop as pitchers. By telling them what to do, you don't let them have any responsibility for the mistakes that they make or any benefit from the right decisions that they make. So they haven't learned how to deal with adversity and circumstance. They've simply learned how to follow a game plan that's been given to them. And I think that if you take that away, give them the information, let them pitch the way they feel is appropriate at that given day, how the ball feels in their hand, etc. You're going to find guys developing more. The human factor is back into the game.
Right.
And there's going to be a lot of pitchers that are very capable of getting guys out the third and fourth time through the lineup because they've figured out how to play chess at 90 miles an hour instead of simply following a game plan that everybody knows exists.
And when did this transition into this? I mean, do you think it was the large money coming in that brought about a lot of this, or was it more of the collegiate player and we can't push them as much because they just played a season? I mean, where do you think this all came in? Because it just seems it's probably been over a number of years, but to a lot of fans, it just seems so sudden. You know what I'm saying? When do you feel this came into play?
Well, when Billy Beane started with the statistical analysis of how to put together a ball club, that's probably where it started in earnest. I think there's probably little bits of it here and there previous, but now everybody was in a race to figure out whose computer was better and which algorithm was better. And, we're going to find out that, we get enough statistical data, we're going to find out that at 2:10 on a Tuesday afternoon with partially cloudy skies, if you throw a slider to Miguel Cabrera, he's going to hit a ground ball to second base 80% of the time. So that's how the game is played nowadays. So you've taken the thought process away from the pitcher rather than giving him data about tendencies and what guys are apt to do in given situations and allowing them to implement that information. You're telling them in large part, this is how we're going to go about it, and that takes all the benefit and responsibility away from them and puts it on the guy who's told them how to do it.
Right.
And they simply look at the stats and say, here, the stats said this should have worked. If it didn't work, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
So nobody takes the blame anywhere.
Nobody takes it. And I mean, you don't even see pitchers charting games anymore. I mean, that's like a past thing because they get all of this information. I guess they figure they don't need that.
Well, that's very true. There's so much more information that it's probably overwhelming in a lot of respects. I still think it's beneficial for the next day pitcher to be involved in charting somehow. It doesn't have to be the meticulous stuff that they do nowadays with spin rate and velocity and all that good stuff. But if you simply go with sequencing and location and keep some kind of a record, you're paying close enough attention. You see exactly what's going on with that given lineup. It may not be against the same stuff that you're going to feature, but you see what guys are doing in real time right now that you might be able to utilize to your benefit the next day when you go out there. And by not having that information and simply following a game plan, it's more physical against physical, and whether you can outstuff somebody rather than figuring a way through sequencing and location to get what I call friendly contact. Let your defense do some work, and hopefully get outs on 6 pitches, 8 pitches during the course of an inning, as opposed to having to try and outstuff them and throw 20.
Right. Now, you played in an era where you played with a ton of Hall of Famers. Who was the toughest one for you to face?
Well, see, everybody wants to ask me that question. And as soon as I name one name, I've made 50 other guys angry. So I can't say that I can really do that. What I did going into any given game was try and pick however many guys there might have been in that lineup, 2, 3, could have been as many as 5. That if the game's on the line, I'm not going to let this guy beat me. I'm going to be it's not overly cautious, but I'm going to be on my best to try and make him hit my pitch rather than play challenge baseball in that situation, because he's liable to be equal to the challenge. So that was probably the way I tried to approach that, and it paid off in a lot of instances. A lot of good hitters got their hits off of me, and a lot of times they were in non-count situations. The double that didn't drive in any runs, that he can have that all day long. That's okay. Now, back to your question. I'm going to name one guy that you may or may not have heard of, that was a backup catcher in Montreal that beat me to death one year. I think he was 7 for 11 or something like that, and I couldn't get him out. I tried to knock him down. I threw him everything but the kitchen sink. His name was John Bacabella.
Bacabella. Sure. Well, that's funny how that works out. That it's a backup catcher that gives you a hard time. But what was it like to face Pete Rose or Johnny Bench, somebody like that? I mean, Pete Rose had to be a pain in the neck to get out.
Pete was a tough out. There's no question. He usually got a piece of the ball. You rarely were going to strike him out. So the test really was to try and keep him in a situation where his aggressive approach and swings would lead to contact that would be at somebody. So if you could figure a way to make a pitch in sequence with another one that, based on previous swing, would indicate that you may get this ball hit to the shortstop, or if I take a little bit off it, he may get under it and loft a fly ball to the outfield. Those types of things where you're looking for a softer hit ball. Not that Pete had everything soft, but not something that he's going to be able to square up and hit a line drive somewhere. And that's the best way to approach him for me. And certainly not a guy that you wanted to walk and put on base, because he was going to be a nightmare on the bases. And Bench was a guy that I tried to keep him from extending his arms. I tried to be as inside as often and as hard as possible, so that he hopefully couldn't get the fat part of the bat to the ball where it could stay fair. And that worked fairly well.
And now, what was it like throwing at Jerry Grody?
Oh, Groats was great. He could be a royal pain in the neck, because he was really a staunch competitor. And a lot of times would take that out on you if you weren't doing the best that you could do. But I love the way he called the game. I love the way he caught the game, and was certainly a great guy to have on your side when you're out there trying to beat somebody.
Now, Ed Kranepool has a picture of him and Roberto Clemente, and he's handing him a baseball, and he said it was the final hit of Clemente's career. And I believe that you were the pitcher of that game.
I was the pitcher. No question about that. When I got into the coaching ranks, that gave me instant recognition with the Latin ball players. They would hear my name and say, "Oh, you the guy, Clemente Pitt." So it was sort of funny, but no, I was again an oblivious rookie late in my rookie season, trying to win a ball game, having a tough day. We were getting beat. I tried to make a pitch with a curveball that, when it left my hand, I knew was going to be a ball, and I was sort of upset with myself because it wasn't even going to be a strike. I didn't think he was even going to offer at it, and he took his usual big stride and kept his hands back, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here comes the bat. And he managed to reach out there and hook this thing into left center field for a double. And, I'm thinking to myself, damn, that's a pretty good piece of hitting. And the place goes crazy. There were only, 13,000, 14,000 people there, but everybody's cheering, and they're handing him the ball. And I can't understand what this is all about until I see the 3,000 flashing on the scoreboard, and then my light bulb went on.
Well, it's always nice to have one claim to the fame, even if it's, somebody had to do it. And look, you've got a World Series win. Nobody, not too many people could say that.
Well, I'll trade one for the other. That's okay. And if I got to be tied to a guy for that reason, I couldn't be tied to a classier, better ball player than that one.
Do you think we're going to have a baseball season this year?
Oh, my golly. I honestly do not know. This is some really unreal and scary times. I'm certainly glad that they have called things off when they did, and hopefully we can get this bug taken care of and put behind us, and everything can go back to normal as soon as possible. But hopefully that won't be too soon, because this does seem like it's a nasty bug, and don't wish it on anybody.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, John, I want to thank you so much. This has been a real joy and a real pleasure, and I just enjoyed it so much. I just thank you so much for coming on today.
Not a problem. I enjoyed it too. It's always good to talk shop.